macOS, yes! Whether you're stuck on macOS for work or school, or you genuinely love it because you're an Apple fanboy, this is our second to last guide. Linux will be our last one, so make sure you're subscribed to catch that. It will be phenomenal. And on that note, before you leave your angry comment,
imagine trying to make macOS private.
we need to address this every time for you gatekeepers. Privacy is a sliding scale. There are countless improvements people can make to improve their privacy and security, even on macOS, as we'll prove in this very extensive guide, where we push macOS to its limits. If you're looking for Linux, again, that guide is coming soon, and we'll even talk more about macOS alternatives later in this video. We have 3 zones for this guide to make it easier for you to follow. Zone 1 shouldn't impact day-to-day usage, so I recommend you implement everything within it. Zone 2 will require small changes that may impact convenience, and Zone 3 is for those looking to go above and beyond. This is mostly a guideline, and your specific needs may vary depending on your threat model. If you want to learn how to threat model and develop a plan in deciding what you want to protect, refer to this great source in a description. You'll find links for resources in a description as well. Let's start with Zone 1, your device password. Your device's password is your first form of protection on your device, making it not only an important thing to secure, but an important thing to implement. Use a strong password. If you're logged out of your device, having that strong password will be your first line of defense. We discourage the use of Touch ID, though it is ultimately better than a weak password or none at all. Following the advice of Edward Snowden and countless other tech professionals, we recommend using a passphrase, something easy for you to remember, but difficult to hack.
Like Margaret Thatcher is 110% sexy.
Wow.
As a side note, make sure notifications as well as any voice assistants and settings toggles are not publicly accessible on your lock screen for anyone to view. Passwords you use on websites are a commonly left out part of your security. If you're using the same or similar passwords for all your services, one breach can very easily lead to the others being breached since they utilize the same or similar credentials. Weak passwords are in general very easy to crack. Make sure, at least in Zone 1, that you are using strong, unique passwords. I'll leave a source on what that means and different methods of doing it. Zone 2 will go further into this and different recommendations that you should probably follow. Unlike Windows, macOS has wonderful built-in disk encryption tools that you don't need to pay extra for.
BitLocker.
I guess it's just included in the Apple tax. Just go to System Preferences, Security and Privacy, File Vault, enable it, and follow the prompts. It's that simple and will prevent someone from accessing your data without a password, which is otherwise possible even with your user password. These are 2 different things we've covered in an old video. VeriCrypt is an open source file encryption tool, though there's always the built-in disk utility as well. We still recommend downloading VeriCrypt as you can still create new encrypted containers or just use encryption for flash drives and external drives. We have a guide on VeriCrypt. We recommend checking that out to make it easier for you if you've never used it before. This will always confuse me, but macOS has a built-in firewall that's, last I checked, off by default. So go into your system preferences, security and privacy, and just enable the firewall. It's that easy. You can customize it a bit more if you're tech savvy, but for most people, just getting it enabled is the most important part. Antiviruses are tricky as they can catch some malware with often a detrimental impact to your privacy. The first thing everyone should do is just stop using their free antivirus from a commercial company with absolutely no business model. They're probably just relying on data. Frankly, on macOS in 2021, we recommend most of our viewers don't use any antivirus, as the likelihood of being impacted is extremely slim, especially if you're following proper etiquette. Section 3 of Go Incognito really deep dives into what to do and not to do to prevent malware and other naughty things online. Imagine you're a goalkeeper and an antivirus is the net behind you. It's not meant to be your first line of defense. You are. Also, check out VirusTotal. It allows you to upload any file online for malware, though even they don't have a great privacy policy. You should assume everything you upload to VirusTotal will be public information, so don't actually upload sensitive personal documents to VirusTotal. Your browser has the ability to track everywhere you go on the internet, so ensuring you are using something with proven security and privacy is paramount to protecting all of your web traffic. Safari honestly isn't terrible. It's one of the better default browsers you can use out of all operating systems. However, Brave and Firefox are options too, as well as the Tor browser. We'll talk more about these browsers and your options down the road, but for now in Zone 1, just avoiding and getting off Google Chrome is a fantastic first step. We have a top 5 browsers video which goes into your options and the pros and cons of each. Similar to your browser, your search engine also has the capability of tracking everything you do on the internet, which major companies like Google do. The 2 mainstream recommendations are DuckDuckGo and Startpage. So see if you can implement one of those within your browsers or use something else with privacy and open source in mind, like search.me. Your IP address uniquely identifies you on the internet, and it's used by websites to track you. Not to mention your ISP can harvest all of your web data, especially here in the United States. A simple way to prevent this is by utilizing a trusted VPN provider to handle your web traffic. As for which VPN to choose, the golden question. We do systematic community-driven VPN reviews on our channel. It's a mouthful. I'll leave our most current top 5 best VPNs video as a card if you want a more thorough answer, and in a description. We also have all our open source tools on our website, including a chart where you can compare different services. To make it simple for you, at the time of making this video, we're gonna recommend Proton VPN, iVPN, Mullvad, and Windscribe for a focus on user privacy, which is what this video is mostly about. Links to all those are down below. DNS is a domain name service, and they are like a phone book for the internet, directing you to the sites you visit every day. The problem is most default DNS providers track your browsing, so use a DNS provider with privacy in mind. If you're using a VPN service, it likely uses its own DNS, meaning you don't need to worry about this. If you aren't using a VPN, check out the DNS options on PrivacyTools.io and manually set them on your Mac. Instructions on how to do that are below as well. You can also use some browsers that utilize other DNS improvements if you choose to. Lastly, you can use a host file on your MacBook to prevent certain naughty domains from being accessed altogether. This is broad, but less is almost always more when it comes to security and privacy. Each additional program and setting you utilize increases attack surface and the possibility of abuse with your personal information. If you're a person with a never-ending list of programs that you mostly never use, they're likely not just doing harm in the background with your data, but also negatively impacting storage space and power consumption. So delete them. Or for the bloatware, uninstall as much as you can. Some programs like Discord have progressive web apps, so if you can utilize the web app within your browser to function like the program, it's a great way to separate the program and keep it within your browser, which is typically safer and gives you more control. Outside of programs and settings, try to frequently clear data you don't need, like old system logs, temporary data like browser cache, history cookies, and any sensitive data that doesn't need to be on your computer 24/7. Tying into minimalism, there are lots of settings on macOS and its programs that you may never use that are pointlessly collecting data about you. The general rule of thumb is if you're not using it, turn it off. This may include things like Siri, some iCloud features, disabling the remote options in the sharing menu, limiting what Spotlight can access, especially Spotlight Suggestions, which sends all of your queries to Apple. There are dozens of things inside your settings I recommend disabling. I'll leave a link below for a great blog post of someone who compiled lots of these settings. It's a bit outdated, but still mostly holds up. Make sure to be thorough and double check everything. Do not forget to go through each individual program settings as well to ensure nothing is needlessly tracking you in the background. On a similar note, program and OS permissions should not be taken lightly. Out of all the desktop operating systems in 2021, macOS, hands down, has the best permissions setup. So take advantage of it. Programs need a permission to record your screen, access your camera, track your keyboard input, use things like Bluetooth, and even access your file storage. You can make it so your browser only has access to files in your downloads folder, so it's physically impossible for your browser or any other program to access your sensitive documents. Make sure to take advantage of it, and make sure to brag to all your Windows friends because they have an abomination alternative. Most things you read about, like the newest intimidating macOS exploits, are almost always patched through updates. The best thing to do, as annoying as they can be, is to utilize automatic software updates for macOS and all of your programs. To keep up with the newest updates and concerns for all operating systems and just general privacy and security, check out our weekly news podcast surveillance report. We do our best job of trying to keep you all educated on this stuff because it's really hard to keep up with. And that is going to wrap up Zone 1. Let's get ready for Zone 2. FOSS stands for free and open source. This means the software's code is publicly accessible to the community. This ensures you can verify the security and privacy behind the software. We have a video covering this a lot more thoroughly. In general, I'd advise moving from proprietary to FOSS programs as much as possible. Yes, macOS is proprietary, but improvements are improvements. Some VPNs like Proton VPN, iVPN, and Mullvad have open source clients. Signal has a desktop program that's open source, and all recommended browsers mentioned in Zone one are open source as well. Just go through your list of programs and type each of them into alternative2.net with the open source filter and see if there's something you can switch to. It's okay if your OS isn't completely open source. Your computer is ironically used less for communication than you might think, at least in the context of direct contact with another individual or individuals. With email, it's recommended to keep email in your browser to add an additional safety layer between an email and your operating system, though macOS does typically do an overall good job of sandboxing things properly. In regards to what email provider to use, we have a nice video on that. With direct messaging, first, I recommend switching to something built from the ground up to protect you, like Signal or another messenger listed on our site's resources page. From there, I'd say iMessage isn't a terrible option, though we'd still push you to consider those other messengers. Finally, if you are stuck using something like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, at least enable end-to-end encryption where you can, and try to keep the program off of your computer as well, keeping them inside your browser instead. From there, thanks to the pandemic, video conferencing is the next big thing, and like direct messaging, the first goal is to move to things that just naturally respect you. Jitsi, Calyx Meet, an instance of Jitsi, and Big Blue Button are all good alternatives to Zoom, Skype, and others. Oh, and Signal finally got desktop video support, so that works too. It's phenomenal. From there, FaceTime is a decent option. I don't think it's terrible, and it's likely better than things like Zoom and others. Finally, like direct messaging, if you are stuck on a not so great platform, the goal is to keep it inside your browser when possible and avoid using the program. We'll talk about virtual machines later in the video, which are also good tools for invasive programs when you need them. Avoiding Google is a great step for controlling your data, as Google is not a privacy-friendly company whatsoever. For Zone 2, disable as much as possible related to Google in your My Activity page and ensure you're using 2FA and have properly secured your account. Additionally, being less reliant on Google is equally important, so switching from Chrome to Brave gives you a less Google life, and you don't need to go cold turkey to make improvements. Switching your default search engine, turning off everything in the My Activity page, and switching from Chrome to Brave is huge and should only take you maybe 15 minutes to do. Also, while we're here, log out of Google in your OS settings as well as any other accounts if you can. The less you have, the better. Let's actually talk about Apple. You are on a Mac after all. One very cool thing is it's pretty easy to use your Mac without any Apple account altogether. For Zone 2 though, I encourage you to limit your use of your Apple account to prevent some of its data collection. This mostly means going into your iCloud and limiting as much as you can in the system preferences. Siri is another place I'd consider opting out of, since there is data collection involved with using Siri. You can also refuse to use the App Store and download programs from the program's official sites, something you should probably be doing anyway. Just try to take some steps in limiting your reliance on Mr. Tim. To continue with passwords, outside using strong and unique passwords, which we covered in Zone 1, where and how they're stored can be incredibly important as well. Password managers are a commonly recommended way to go. We have covered what password managers to use in the lesson of Go Incognito, so check that out for a long answer. In short, avoid storing your passwords within your browser. If you want simple cloud syncing between your devices, Bitwarden is probably the way to go. It's open source and it's pretty well trusted. If you want a more DIY password manager, there's KeePass, which is local. We have a whole guide to KeePass on our channel for those who want to learn how it works, as well as a comparison video between these two fantastic open source password managers. Beyond having a strong password, implementing two-factor authentication is arguably just as important. 2FA combines something you know, a password, with something you have, like a code generated locally on a separate device. At the very least, SMS 2FA, which are those texts you receive with a code, is better than nothing, although there are a couple issues with SMS 2FA, such as the risk of SIM swapping. The better and more recommended option is a local authenticator app on your phone that uses a QR code. Not every site supports this, but many do, so look for it and use it instead of SMS when available. If you want FOSS recommendations, Android has AndOTP and Aegis, and for iOS, there's Authenticator and Tofu. Part 2 of browsers is to take things to the next level. I'd recommend sticking to strictly open source browsers like Tor, Firefox, Brave, and Chromium, and properly hardening and configuring each browser for the absolute best safety. We cover Firefox hardening in Go Incognito, and Brave mostly requires just basic settings toggles, as it does much of the work for you out of the box. Tor should not be messed with outside the basic safety sliders. No matter which browser you choose, you should avoid installing extensions you don't need, as these can be extremely problematic. Radios apply to anything that gives off a signal on your computer. This means mainly Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and GPS. We'll cover the more extreme solutions in Zone 3, but for Zone 2, try disabling Bluetooth and location services when they're not being used. Bluetooth, for one, can be an insecure protocol, not to mention it being an instrumental tool used to track your movements. This is a smaller concern on your computer as it's likely not traveling around town like your phone, but it's still good practice. The general rule of thumb for radios is if it doesn't need to be on, just turn it off. The last radio you should be aware of is Wi-Fi. Your device broadcasts a unique ID called a MAC address, which can be used to track you. We covered how this is done and how elaborate it can be in Go Incognito. In short, consider randomizing your MAC address. This is not yet a built-in feature from macOS, but it can be done manually, though it seems the documentation for doing this is still pretty limited since they changed some things in Big Sur. I'll leave a Stack Exchange solution down below that seems to be working. I can't believe that's like the best resource I found for this. macOS offers multiple user accounts. You can use these to compartmentalize or separate different aspects of your life. Maybe you have a business account, a school account, a dating account, and then your personal account. The options are really limitless here. The goal is to separate aspects of your life that don't need to be intermixed for both privacy and security benefits. Additionally, for those who want to go above and beyond, you can have an administrator account and a standard user account and stick to only using that standard user account for your daily usage as a security perk. This prevents any rogue applications, malware, or anything else from utilizing that administrative access to damage your system, which is normally kind of required. Let's talk about physical protection and some tips related to that. Consider locking your desktop or laptop to a desk or wall if this is an option. I'll leave some products below. Also, don't leave your system unattended, especially in public. Make sure it's always with you, and if you are forced to leave your system unattended, at the very least, make sure you're logged out. Next, most people are aware of this one, but covering your cameras can prevent a theoretical camera hack where someone spies on you through your webcam. Cover them up very carefully though with the MacBooks. If you never use your cameras and don't want to, just use tape. A nice thing with desktops is they normally don't have a webcam like laptops do, so you can instead rely on an external webcam with a great amount of peace of mind once it's unplugged. The last step for Zone 2 is utilizing a privacy screen protector. These make it so it's very difficult to view your device's screen from side angles, protecting your personal information from snoops and shoulder attacks. I'll leave a link in the description of some privacy screen protectors. I cannot recommend them more, and the peace of mind that they give me in public spaces is just wonderful. Unless you have creepy roommates, desktops at home likely won't benefit much from this, but your laptop definitely can, so check those out. And this is it, everybody. Zone 3. And like I said earlier, this is for the extreme users looking for the utmost security and privacy on their devices. First, hardening, where you are going to improve the security and privacy of macOS through more advanced configuration changes. And yes, actually it is pretty advanced. Apple allows you to set a firmware password to prevent booting from anything that's not your startup disk. Instructions will be below, though keep in mind this can be theoretically bypassed pretty easily. It's just an additional layer of protection. The next step I'd recommend is a firewall designed for outgoing requests, meaning you can prevent any program or domain from accessing the internet from your computer. Lulu is a phenomenal FOSS option that allows you to block many things, even Apple's own domains, so you can really fine-tune what your computer is doing. Some people recommend Little Snitch, though frankly I found Lulu to do everything I needed, and it's completely free and open source. So try Lulu first, and if you see something it doesn't do that Little Snitch does, then sure, try Little Snitch. From there, macOS hardening is really more on the complex side, so proceed with caution. This GitHub repo is such a blessing. Seriously, it's just phenomenal. If you really are taking this seriously and want to do the smallest possible things, you have that kind of threat model, this is where you're gonna go. Like everything else in this video, links are in the description, and this will allow you to be a pro. To take Google a step further, you should at this point fully delete it or remove every trace of it on your system unless you have some elaborate solution to properly compartmentalize things. To repeat Zone 2, if this is all too extreme, at the very least, ensure you've handed over as little personal information as possible to Google, disabled analytics performed by them in the settings, disabled as many features as possible, and logged into your Google My Activity page and disabled everything and logged out of Google on your OS. Side note, delete social media too. We just made a video talking about this and how awesome it can be. We already hinted at it earlier, but as you can expect, a good thing to do at this point is logging out of all Apple-related functions on your Mac. Unlike the iPhone, you can install, download, and use programs because there's no reliance on the App Store. You will lose out on some things like Find My Mac and other iCloud-related functions, but honestly, it's not terribly difficult for most people unless they're really involved in the Apple ecosystem. All right, and then snip snip. These are those pesky cameras and mics. If you really don't want them, consider removing the cameras. Depending on your Mac model, this may be extremely simple or near impossible. You can also snip the microphone and stick to only using the microphone on your earbuds. This is for extreme threat models, but the option is available. Desktop users likely don't have to worry about this. Do note that opening up your device will void its warranty. We're talking about Apple here. Right to repair, let's go. And finally, as nice as macOS can be, sometimes the easier option is honestly just to switch your OS, gatekeeping aside. So here are some things you can do or implement into your life. First, virtual machines. We've covered using virtual machines for improving privacy and security in Go Incognito, and it stands true for this video as well. You can use Linux as a guest OS for your Mac, or you can fully migrate to Linux and use Windows in a virtual machine. Second, you can dual boot. Maybe. Boot Camp already has some issues with Windows, and Linux will make things a bit more complicated, though it is technically possible on most Mac models, and there are some guides online. If you're able to get this running, this gives you a lot of compartmentalization while still letting you boot into macOS for certain things. Maybe Linux is used for everything except video production, and that's the only data Apple gets about you, which isn't really incriminating for most threat models. Third, there are live operating systems. These can be any generic Linux distro like a Ubuntu Live OS, or it can be something more hardcore like Tails. The point stands, if you are stuck on macOS, don't want VMs, can't or don't want to dual boot, but still need a safe place where you can have peace of mind, you can always keep a flash drive that lets you access an OS that you can put a lot more faith in. Though, fair warning, like dual booting, it seems like kind of a pain in the ass compared to most normal computers. Fourth, you fully move to a new OS. It's probably worth your time if you're doing this to just get a whole new machine if you were to go this route, since it's probably simpler and less expensive than going with a Mac. And that wraps up Zone 3, and that's kind of summarizes how to make macOS as private and secure as we can. It's important to emphasize improvements are improvements, and you shouldn't listen to the dip who immediately dismiss macOS without understanding why a user may be dependent on it. The OS you choose is your decision, and we will help you as much as we can to work with your configuration and lifestyle. If you liked this video, we made a Windows version of it as well as an iOS and Android version so you can bring all of your devices to Mac safety. And we even made an all-encompassing Become Anonymous guide for broader advice applicable to everything. Aside from this, if you really want to dive into the world of privacy from start to finish, our Go Incognito course is a phenomenal way to not only learn the ropes, but finish feeling confident in your ability to protect yourself online. It's our most thorough dive into privacy, and people seem to love it. So definitely check that out below. I can't recommend it more. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And a massive thanks to our supporters who believe in our mission in spreading privacy to the masses. Their names are probably being shown at the bottom right now as I'm talking. We can't do it without you. See you next time on Techlore, and goodbye.